Hola, hola, amiga. I'm so excited for you all to join me today because on today's episode, I sit down with my husband, Alejandro or Alex Cuevas, for our annual check in conversation about our parenting journey as we wrap up season 4. Yes, you heard that right. Today is the end of season 4 of the Viva la Mami podcast. If you haven't heard my first conversation with Alex, I will share that episode in the show notes, which is episode 51, where we had our initial conversation about growing together as parents. And I feel like this is almost like the 2.0 version of that conversation because we have evolved, we have grown, and we have done a lot this past year parenting, and together we're raising our 4-year-old son Diego and 21-month-old son Mateo. So we are raising them in Chicago, as most of you know, through social media and what I've shared on the podcast. And really, this past year has brought tremendous change as we moved from a spacious suburban home to a 1-bedroom apartment in the city. And this was ultimately part of our house hacking journey to build generational wealth. And in this raw and honest conversation, Alex shares his perspective on parenting in close quarters, breaking generational patterns, and finding balance between fatherhood and partnership. We discuss the challenges of raising our 2 little ones without extended family nearby, and how we're setting healthy boundaries with our own parents, as well as how we're intentionally creating a different parenting experience than what we had growing up. So we had a lot here. I feel like we kept going in so many different directions. And honestly, I did not prepare a list of questions. I just wanted to have this to be a conversation, and that way you get to experience our world, and that way you get to know a little bit more about us and our relationship and how we parent. And I feel like as first generation parents, we're constantly navigating between two worlds where we want to honor our cultural roots while creating new traditions that align with our own values. And like many of you, we're figuring out how to balance it all between our relationships, our careers, parenting, and self care, all while living in a space that sometimes feels too small for our big dreams. Literally, for us, we live in a small space where, yeah, we feel like we deserve to dream big. And so, whether you're a mama trying to break generational patterns, someone struggling to balance cultural expectations with modern parenting, or simply curious about different parenting journeys, this conversation offers insights into how we're navigating these challenges together. I also encourage you to invite your partner and have them listen to this conversation, especially if you are in a partnered relationship. But before we dive in, I want to remind you that in the show notes, there are 2 links. One where you can suggest different topics like this one, or any topic that you want me to talk about. And I also have another link on proposing a guest, or if you know of a potential guest that could benefit in being on the show, feel free to share their information as well. I think that it's so important to share our stories and for people to share their expertise. And that way, mama, your motherhood journey can be better informed. And you get to create the best version of this wonderful but oftentimes chaotic journey of ours. And I also want to remind you to please rate and review the show. It's so important for me to receive feedback and what you think of this show so that people like you and I can find Viva la Mami. And that way, Latina moms don't feel in isolation as it relates to their motherhood journey. So please don't forget to review the show if you're listening through Apple Podcasts. Otherwise, you can also rate the show on Spotify. If you listen to us on YouTube, you can also subscribe and like us. And that way we get to build this community for you because it is so needed. And before we jump in, I am excited to share that for the upcoming months of March and April, I'll be releasing solo episodes, all under 30 minutes, because I know how precious your time is. Between juggling work, family responsibilities, and trying to squeeze in a few minutes of yourself, who has time for hour-long podcasts? And I know that I've been trying to keep it under an hour, but y'all, sometimes my conversations with guests are amazing, and I want to give them the space and time to share their expertise, their thoughts, their experiences, and journeys. However, these upcoming 8 solo episodes throughout the months of March and April, you will be hearing all the advice and community that you need while me respecting your busy schedule, because I totally get it. All right. So, enough of this whole call to action. I know that I've shared a lot, but I am very excited to have Alex on the show again. And yeah, that way you got the inside scoop of what is going on in our lives, how we feel, how we're managing and navigating parenthood. Because, like I've shared, my motherhood journey wouldn't have started without him, because he is a part of it as well. All right, Mama. Well, now let's dive into the final episode of season 4 with my hubby, Alex Cuevas. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of 2 on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in 2 identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Alex. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm so glad you are here for the second time on the Viva la Mami podcast. It has been a full year since the last time that we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in a different space. We were living at my parents' house for a little bit as we were getting this place remodeled. And so it's wild how much and how many things happened within 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to say thank you for being here, because I think it's so important for people to listen on what we've been doing, kind of catching up on our lives, sort of thing. And that way, they can kind of be a part of our journey, because obviously having this community and this platform, it's all about motherhood. But I think that part of my specific motherhood journey couldn't be complete, without you. So as we were preparing for our conversation together is, what is something that we really want to touch on? And I think just like the unexpected things, or the things that we kind of felt unexpected about parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think specifically when it comes to our experience as newer parents, because we have 2 little ones. At the time of this recording, we have an almost 4-year-old and a 19-month-old.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 little ones, so we are very new to this journey. But I know that many of the listeners will resonate, especially as what we've thought about parenting before and now, as a little bit more experienced parents, and any surprises that came up, that has come up really.
Right.
Yeah. So before we delve into the conversation, if you can share a little bit about you, kind of keeping us up to date, what you've been doing.
Okay. Well, still learning as well. So trying to navigate this journey, parenthood journey with you, alongside with you. I mean, yeah, it's what can I say? It's tough. It's very very tough. I mean, especially now in our current living situation, our current house, where we're all crammed up together, getting in each other's
Yeah.
way. I think that adds an extra layer of difficulty to our everyday, day to day life. You know.
Yeah. And for the listeners who don't know about our current living situation, I mean, I've shared this a little bit. I don't think I've shared enough. I think that, yes, it's a part of our journey as parents, but maybe this can be
Mhm.
a full load of content that I would share. But for those of you who haven't heard or kind of followed us along, we moved from a 4-bedroom house, single family house, back in the suburbs, and we moved to the city. We're currently in Chicago, and we currently live in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Mhm.
And it's not a rented apartment, it's actually a house
Otters.
hacking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole house. The term is house hack. I mean, I think that is just like a buzzword, but in reality, this is what our families have done for many, many
Mhm.
generations, especially for the first gen folks. If you know what it is, you're basically living in a multifamily household. But our tenants are not family members, they are
Mhm.
our tenants. We decided to buy a building as a way to build generational wealth. And one of the things that have allowed us really is for us to, well, for me, not to work full time. And that way, we can raise our kids together. And that in itself can be a blessing. And also, it can be a challenge
Oh, an extreme
because,
challenge. Yeah. It's an extreme
they're with
challenge.
us. Yeah, they're with us 24/7, and you work from home. And so being that we're literally cramped up
Mhm.
into a 1-bedroom space, I mean, it has been a challenge. And currently, right now, where we're recording, I'm at the very far
And
end
I'm in the living
of,
room.
yeah, like I'm in my little room here, my little recording studio, which is the very far end of the apartment, and you're at the other end. So yeah, it's definitely been something that at least I'm still adapting. And there have been moments where I'm like, oh, how would life have been like if we were to still live in that, 4-bedroom house and that
Mhm.
single family home, right? But we were very intentional in terms of having a different lifestyle, in terms of how can we make this work at least for a short amount of time. And I know that many people, especially when they're married or who have kids, they want to do this, but they are afraid. It's always that fear, right? They're not willing to take up on that challenge because
Mhm.
they feel like they have a family, because they have a family, they shouldn't mess up their kids in some capacity. I think
Mhm.
that I've definitely have seen that, where one parent wants to do something different but the other one is afraid because it could affect the kids or what have you. And I think for us, like, our kids are so happy here, at least, even though we are kind of struggling, where we want to keep them calm, or
Yeah.
we want to have a little bit more privacy. I know that the boys are having a blast because they're literally cramped up with us.
Yeah. There's no escape from them. So that's why I think they're happy because they know we can't get away from them.
Yeah. And so how has like this year been for you? At least I know that we you shared about literally being in a smaller space, but is this something that you anticipated, or is this something that you're still struggling with in terms of our current living situation? I guess I
Oh,
never asked that.
yeah. Well, now it's out in the open. Well, anticipation and actual like reality are two different things, right? For me, at least, like I anticipated it being tough. This move of ours being tough, but actually living through it, it's 10 times more than what I could have ever imagined, right? I mean, I knew that it was going to be tough. I knew that it was going to be cramped up, especially with two growing kids, two energetic kids, always yelling, always stomping on the ground. But I mean, yeah, if you would have asked me this question like last year, it would have been completely different. For me, at least, I would have thought about it completely different. But I mean, I'm happy. You know, I mean, I think we're. It's always. It's so you always have to make a sacrifice to move 10 steps forward, right? So I mean, I
Mm.
think that's what I always tell myself, at least to keep myself sane, because because if you don't have those check-ins with yourself, you might lose it. At least that's for me, because I think that's why I'm so quiet sometimes. You know, when we're here, because I'm just telling myself we're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay, and we will be okay. I know that. So yeah, I mean, it's been tough. It's been a journey. Hopefully, we'll be somewhere else, a little bit more comfortable by this time next year. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that could be our challenge, right?
Mm,
In terms of finding a space that can be a little bit more suitable for us. It's not that this space isn't.
mm.
We've
It's
made it
cozy.
work.
It's cozy.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, but being that it is a one bedroom apartment, the kids are the ones in that bedroom. They're sharing the room. They have their room. We
Sleeping on the
on the
sofa
other hand,
bed for a year, back
yeah.
creating back problems for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're literally like my brother-in-law said, like we're living the immigrant life.
Mm,
That's how many of our family members lived, and that's in a way it's a privilege because we made that decision.
mm,
We made the choice of living in this kind of temporary living situation
mm,
to save us money in terms of like not spending anything on the cost of living. That has been something that is very rare for many families, right?
mm,
Like, who gets to house hack? I mean, you only hear this with like single people or newly wedded couples who are just starting their lives together, but an established family of four, like,
mm.
you don't hear this.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, yeah, it's something very unique. And I keep telling you, Alex, you got to do something about this, kind of create your own platform about how families can also house hack. But I'm just putting it out there
No,
for you.
thank you. But as your audience could probably tell, I'm not the type of person that would create this for myself, right? So, or like to share. But you never know. You never know something in
Yeah.
the future once I get a little bit more knowledge in this field. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
no, and
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I mean, it's now that you bring up an extra interesting point. Like, I never actually thought about this, but this is actually, we're living how I was brought up, right?
Hmm.
My parents were, I used to live, oh, yeah, I used to live with my parents. Well, my parents actually still live in, for the past 30 years. Wow. It's actually crazy saying that out loud. For the past 30 years, they live in a small 2 bedroom, 1 bath. You know, it was a family of four, myself, my sister, my parents, obviously. And now I can see it from the child's point of view. When I was a kid, it was fun because I always got to hang out with my sister. You know, my mom was always just like an arm's reach away. Anything I needed, she was always there, right? And then I can kind of see when my dad was always annoyed, right? Because he didn't have no privacy, right? Anytime he felt angry, he would always just have to put on a face, not to show
Mm.
it, even though he still shows it. He still showed it, but what can you do, right? And that's now I really understand him from his point of view. You know, having to put on a face for our two little ones so that they won't see us be frustrated. I try my best, but it still gets out there, right? That anger still shows. I'm not like how you say I don't have a poker face, right? All my emotions just are out in the open sometimes. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting what we're going through right now. So
Yeah. That's an interesting point, and I guess I never realized that until you literally just mentioned in terms of how, yeah, we have to, yeah, nos tenemos que portar bien in front of our kids so
mm,
that, yeah, we don't show like our emotions.
that's tough.
And it's really tough. I mean, I've definitely, this has happened a couple times, a handful of times,
More than a few.
where, yeah, where I just, I have all the anger, and I think it's not because it's them, right? It's
Mm,
because of me. Perhaps I didn't have enough sleep, or perhaps, I haven't been taking care of myself necessarily, or the way that I wish I could. And yeah, it does make it very difficult when you are in a small space and you don't have that privacy, where
Yeah.
you can't remove yourself necessarily because your kids are literally behind you. And I think that this happens everywhere, but when it comes to the environment, it can make an impact.
Hmm.
And I think that in itself is kind of unique. I don't hear of many families that go through that struggle. I mean, I definitely hear it from like Diego's school, for example. I know that there's a lot of families who live in small apartments like this one. We are in the city. Everyone experiences having a cramped up space,
Hmm.
especially when you have kids. But yeah, now that I see it from that perspective, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, we don't scar our children with this. So, but whatever, they'll be
No,
all
I
right.
don't
They'll be all right.
think so. Yeah, and I think, I mean, it happens everywhere, right?
Mm,
Whether if you are in a big ass home versus like a one bedroom apartment, I think at the end of the day, it's important to like apologize to your kids if you do end up acting up in front
yeah,
of them. And
and
for
we do.
me, at
Yeah, we
least,
do.
and we do, yeah, like we definitely do that. And I think it's important that we express emotion in front of our kids,
Mm,
because that way they're able to understand that we are also human, that
mm.
we make mistakes, and then, we
And that
end up
it's yeah,
apologizing.
that it's important to realize when you mess up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so our environment is different than last year. Last year we were an arm's reach with our family, with my family specifically, where if you had to go to the office, for example, I wasn't alone. It was my
Mm,
sister working from home, or my parents were there. Someone was in the house because we were with my parents. We were staying at my parents
yeah, we
this
had
time.
backup. Mm,
Yeah, we had backup.
mm.
And now this year, it's just you and I.
It's just riding solos. Yep.
Yeah. And, and for context for my listeners, my family is in the suburbs. So they're 40 minutes to an hour away,
Right.
including traffic, from us. And my siblings are there with them as well. They're in the suburbs with them. And yeah, like we have no family here except your parents. But how has that transition been for you, at least? Do you think that, comparing the first year of you being a dad, where everyone just talks about how hard it is going through the newborn stage,
Mm.
how do you compare that to now?
Well, the newborn phase, that was amazing. That was easy compared to what we're doing now. Because it's easy with newborns. I mean, they cry, they're either hungry or they're something's bothering them, right? Now it's like, especially with our oldest one, you never know what kind of emotion he's going to be feeling next. He's happy
Mhm.
one time, he's mad the next one. So it's like you constantly just have to be prepared for what stage the toddler is going to decide to show. But yeah, I mean, when we were at your parents, I mean, it was, yeah, like how you mentioned, there was a sense of comfort, at least for me too, knowing that when I did have to work, that I had that when I was busy, that you weren't going to be alone, right? That you weren't going to be struggling with the kids. And but at the same time, for me, I felt constantly watched, right?
Mm.
I mean, if that makes any sense, but like I just couldn't be myself. I couldn't do, you know, if I wanted to, like, let's say, grab something to drink, I'm like, constantly looking around, see where somebody's at. If I wanted just like a second to myself, and there was somebody in the kitchen, I'd be like, damn it. So I just you go hide in the bathroom or something. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's always a mix. It's always a mix. I mean, I felt comfortable there because obviously I love your family. I feel comfortable with them. but at the same time, it's like, all right, I need a little, I need a little space. But yeah, and then moving over here, it's was completely different. You know, we got finally what we wanted to raise our kids how we wanted to without any input from anybody else. But like going back to the same example, like how I use when I work, when I go to work, when I have to go to the office, it's like I feel guilty. I feel guilty, but obviously because I'm leaving you here with two little, very clingy kids, very extremely kids are needy, all the above. I love them. Don't get me wrong, but I'm sorry, they suck sometimes. I'll go ahead and say it. But and yeah, to be a little bit selfish, I feel a big sense of relief because being crammed up in this small spot for 7 days out of the week and then work time, it feels nice to get out. But I know you got it. I know you're more than capable of handling your own with these two. You give them stuff to do. They love you, obviously. But after being gone for like 8 to 10 hours, when I have to go into the office, coming back, seeing them smile, like once I walked into that door, there's nothing better. There's no better feeling than that. Sometimes that's why I wish I can get that almost every day. If that
Hmm.
makes any sense, right?
Yeah. But you work mostly from home. And so how have you navigated that? Because they are attached to us. And and honestly, like I'm just surprised that you haven't gotten fired yet because whenever you have meetings,
uh,
one of them cries or one of them is like begging for you to hold them. And so y- and I think many families who are for the listeners who resonate, I think that this brings back the traumas that
mhm.
they've experienced when they were remote working during the COVID times, during quarantine. And everyone talked about how hard it was. But right now we're living in a different time, right? We're in this post COVID world, and you do have the ability to work from home. So, how does that look like when, our kids are here all
Well,
day, every day?
excuse me. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm very fortunate that my job is pretty flexible with this. Um, the my company, they kind of, how should I say, they kind of pride themselves in being, a family company almost, whatever. But yeah, I am fortunate in that aspect that when they hear our kids running around in the background, I apologize to them. They're like, hey, you know what? It's fine. We have kids of our own. So I am fortunate enough to work with people who are in somewhat of a similar situation as mine. Right? I think that helps a lot. But yeah, I mean, I guess to kind of answer your question, how do I cope or whatever with working from home and being here with you guys? I don't know. Possibly the fact that I'm able to watch Netflix while I work and watching YouTube, all these other things. I find it very. I'm just that type of person that I find it's pretty easy for me to kind of leave my body, if you will. Right, I might be here physically, but mentally I'm somewhere else. I
Mm.
think that helps me a lot, especially like when I'm watching the show and especially hearing Diego scream in the background. Yeah, it annoys me. I'm just like, what's going on? I feel like getting up, to go help. I do, but for them, sometimes when I'm stuck doing something, I mean, my my one side of my brain is focused on Netflix, and the other one is focused on my job. So I mean, I think I'm able
Mm.
to kind of multitask, and that multitasking kind of helps me get through my day to day stuff, shenanigans at work, if you will.
Mhm. Yeah. So men can multitask because I hear they can't.
Um,
Putting you on the spot.
I guess si nos conviene. Yeah,
Ah.
yeah. I might,
Oof, you
and
just broke
yeah.
the bro code or
Yep.
whatever.
I think my man card is gonna be revoked soon. So
Nah. Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing that you're finding a way to distract yourself. But I would say though, I'm very lucky that you are here because I would be miserable. Especially with, school pickups and drop
Mm,
offs, right? Like Diego goes to school for like 2.5 hours a day. Like that would have sucked if Mateo would come with all the
mm,
time, and especially right now in the winter where it takes like double the amount of time to get people ready and out the door. Like, and all while taking these two little ones, like at least I'm able to leave Mateo with you
mm,
and I just take Diego with me. Like that's just one example. But there have been times when I have to go to like doctor's appointments or
mm,
even meet up over for coffee for a business related thing. Like I know that I'm glad that your job is able to allow that, flexibility where you don't
mm,
feel like you're going to get in trouble. Obviously, you don't take it for granted where, you're taking full advantage of that too.
mm,
But at least I know that I can count on you and I'm not alone in this kind of stay at home mom status, right? I think we're both stay at home parents. We
right.
are both co managing this aspect where when you said like how we now have the ability to parent on our own terms,
Mm,
we have that freedom, I would say, where we're not confined to like what others are going to say. No one else is looking at us,
mm,
right? When we are raising our two little ones, I think there's a huge benefit that we are both working together to raise these two kids.
mm,
Pero también, I think a disadvantage is that it's just us two.
mm.
And so, how have you grappled with not having a village at our disposal when sometimes we do need it?
Well, that word, that term, that terminology, village, that's something that I never really understood because I was never really exposed to it. Right? It's growing up, it was just always the four of us. You know, like, and obviously, and I guess to give some context to your viewers, my family is very reserved. Like, we don't talk to each other, we don't tell each other how we're feeling, and we get that a lot from my dad. Right? And that's even though throughout the years I've tried to be a little bit more open, be a little bit more, should I say, vulnerable, like to just get help, if you will, from how I'm feeling, or like to try to heal some stuff or whatever. But yeah, it's just I don't know. I guess I just never really expected help. I guess you can say,
Hmm.
right? So I guess that's what me. Yeah, it'd be nice if we could help. Like if we would want to go out on a date night, like have somebody that we trust. Hey, can you take care of the kids? But obviously we don't have that. But it doesn't really, me personally, it doesn't really affect me because
Hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, I want our kids to be with us, even though sometimes it's like, all right, it'd be nice to pawn them off to somebody, right? But like for the most part, I enjoy their presence. I enjoy us being together as a family, right? Because who can we count on? Just us, just each other. And that's the way I
Yeah.
look at it. I mean, again, don't get me wrong. It'd be nice to have a village, but yeah, we got this.
Yeah. Man, like I don't think I've ever heard this from you. Like getting your perspective as to not necessarily needing a village because you didn't have one.
Mm. Well,
Why am I mean, I've been with we've been together for a long ass time. I feel like
oh,
I
yeah.
I
Uh,
guess I've never seen it that way.
yeah, I mean, I guess when you're put in different situations, like right now, being face to face with you over a camera, just these things, these thoughts that I guess just kind of reemerge, or these feelings
Mm,
that have reemerged, these experiences that have been, kind of just pushed somewhere else, just kind of reemerged. I don't know how else to say it.
hmm.
But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I mean, our village is, I guess, it's just you and I. That
Yeah.
um,
And that is totally common
mm,
nowadays. And that is ultimately the American culture, right? You know, you have a family and it's just up to you
mm,
to determine everything for your kid. And
mm,
whereas for me, like I grew up with a village. I mean, I grew up with a multi-generational household where it was, you know, my grandparents, my aunts, my cousins, my parents, my siblings, like all everyone lived under this one building. And
mm,
then once we moved out of my grandparents' house, we still lived in proximity to them and my grandma took care of us. And so like my mom had the help, like she had her village and I think she never had to worry about whether if, you know, me and my sisters were going to be hungry or if because she was a working mom, like she didn't have to worry about who's going to pick up, drop off the kids. I mean,
mm,
once we got older, she did have to worry because my grandma, you know, then she didn't have the capacity and then they moved to Mexico. But at least when I was a little kid, like a little kid, like Diego's age right now, you know, I just remember being surrounded with so many people. And it wasn't just my parents.
mm,
And I guess that's why when when my mom started to work, I was like Diego's age.
mm,
Um, I don't remember necessarily missing her because I knew that I had this backup of like all these people in my
mm.
life, you know?
Right.
And so that was always something that I always thought that I would have, you know, when
Mm,
I had kids. And now that I don't, I mean, I've been struggling a lot. I've been struggling a lot with that because I'm like, shit, like my kids don't have all these people the way that I grew up being with. And so yeah, you know, I'm still grappling with that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I went back to therapy. You know, in a way I felt
mm,
resent, in a way I felt like sadness because my kids aren't with their tias, they aren't with their primos, they aren't with their grandparents. And then I get this pushback is like, well, y'all chose to move to the city, but you know, when it comes to making sacrifices, kind of going back to what you said, you
mm,
know, this was a huge sacrifice that we had to make in order for us to build generational wealth, right? To do something different. And we always knew that the suburbs wasn't for us. You know, we're just
mm,
two city kids that, you know, we just love being in a big city and that suburban lifestyle wasn't for us. And so,
mm,
but yeah, you know, it's been a journey. And I think this year was it took a lot of reflection, a lot of like deep diving, I guess, to realize, okay, well, I have to come, like, I just had to accept the fact that my kids aren't necessarily growing up with a village. And in terms of like having a physical village, you
mm.
know, the way that I grew up. Yeah.
Well, I guess now that you mentioned that, they're kind of growing up the way I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they'll be all right. Yeah, that's what we. That's why it's our job to instill strength in them. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's other forms of having a village, we have friends, we have, people at Diego's school now. We go to Luna y Cielo and we meet all of these other parents who are also navigating their
Mm,
parenting journey as well. I have this community through Viva la Mami, and you too, you formed a community through the Latino Dad Connection and all of that. And so I think w- we at least know that we're not the only ones struggling, you
mm,
know, and that we can lean into like people who understand our struggle,
mm.
that get it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's always going to be a continuous struggle. I mean, right now, once we get out of this stage, this phase where our kids are young, they're gonna and not necessarily knowing what's going on in their environment, then they're gonna graduate to something else, and then after that, something else. So it's it's gonna be forever. I guess the struggles is always gonna be there. So I guess it's just how we adapt. That's the question that we have to ask ourselves later on.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, it's just again, I guess I'm not trying to sound like a broken tape record here, right? But I guess going back to the term village, I mean, yeah, I guess that's what gives me comfort is just knowing that we are their village and we are each other's village, right? I mean, for the people that might ask, since you mentioned that my parents are close by, I know there's probably going to be some people asking, why don't we drop them off to them or like, let them take care of them? And we do, right? But I guess now, sorry, hermana, if you are hearing this or if you will, anybody that knows my family, right? Um, I think we have come to a point and just developed a certain way that we want to raise our kids, right? And I know that some people out there probably can relate to this, but like, I don't want certain things that my parents are still accustomed to, like how I was brought up. I won't give any examples, whatever, right? But like, just certain things that kind of trigger me sometimes a little bit. I kind of just want to stay a little bit away from that. Yeah, I'm not going to give any context. I'm not going to give any clues, but there's just certain things that I have seen how my parents talk to them and how it's kind of like it just brings me back to, my youth and some triggers that I have. That's why sometimes I kind of just feel like, yeah, let's even though don't get me wrong, I love it when they're with them, right? My Diego and Mateo, they love them. You know, my Diego always asks for them every time Mateo sees them. He goes like, come here, come here. I love that, but sometimes, yeah, it's a little bit of distance is good. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
I didn't know you were going to say that.
But you never know, right? I'm just,
But
I'm
I
just,
think,
I'm just filled with surprises.
Alex, you surprised me like 3 times within this 30-minute conversation so far.
Hey, I still have some surprises after 100 years of being together. So,
Right. No, but I want to thank you for sharing that because yes, I think a lot of people can totally resonate with why you are setting boundaries, and I think that is powerful. And I think it takes a lot of courage, but also a lot of understanding within oneself about the reasons why you are setting boundaries. And a lot of people can't. A lot of people
mm,
even though they want to, whether if it's like kind of like similar to this example or like for me sometimes I do struggle with setting boundaries.
mm,
I think this is a reminder for those that, if you don't want to take your kids to a specific Theo's house and you think that you're going to be shamed about it, or, in this example, you perhaps don't fully want your kids to be exposed to the way that you grew up.
mm,
Um, yeah, I think it all comes down to your values and what kind of outcomes you want for your kids. And I think we have done a pretty good job in terms of them having a wonderful relationship with your parents. I
yeah.
love your parents. They've seen me grow up the way that my parents have seen you grow
Mm,
up. I think it's very important to set those boundaries because it's not only healthy for our kids, but also for you too.
mm.
And I think you fully respect your parents,
I'm still
and I
afraid of
think
them.
out of that
So,
respect. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're afraid of them because they're not going to do anything. I am fully confident that they're not going to do anything to you, but I think in a way it's also important if you want to break these cycles, someone has to do the work. And I think you are doing the work by, setting those specific boundaries.
mm, thank you
Mhm.
for that.
So I know that we're talking a lot about, maybe we're going to talk a lot about your upbringing. Who knows? But, and you don't have to disclose anything, obviously, but what is something you want different for your kids compared to the way that you grew up?
Being more open. Yeah, that was definitely pretty easy right there. Yeah, I mean, again, like I mentioned briefly, me and my family still here don't really talk. I want that to be different for my kids. I want them to have something going on. I don't want them to be afraid of me. I want them to look at me as somebody that can guide them, obviously, because I'm their dad. But just most importantly, I just don't want them to be afraid to speak to me about anything. If they're feeling sad, obviously I want to be there for them. If they're feeling happy, whatever, cuéntame. I'm here. I always want them to know that I'll always be here. That's definitely the biggest thing for me. I want to be there. I want them to know that they can, talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's awesome how you're breaking generational curses, right? That we grew up with.
I'm trying. I really am. It's hard. It's a lot of habits hard to break. Yeah, like how Diego calls me
But
enojon,
no eres
and
enojon.
that's
I
what
think he just says it because he wants it his way. He also needs to understand boundaries. He
yeah,
needs to understand that there are rules, right? And you're
right.
not threatening him. You're not hitting him. You're not parenting the way that you were, that I was, that many of us were. And especially as sons and daughters of immigrants, a lot of the things that we were parented were very influential to like old school way of thinking, very traditional authoritarian way of thinking. And I think that it comes to the expense though on us to do the work, right? And
Mm,
even though it's a lot of work that we're doing, because in a way we're consciously aware, like, okay, I know that I don't want to parent the way that I was parented, but if something happens, if some little mistakes, or if you will, like happens, we then put ourselves really like bad. Like we end up regretting what we said. We feel ashamed of what we did. And I think that
mm.
you should give yourself grace. I should give myself grace too. That even though we don't want to emulate what our parents did, we're not them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think you're doing a great job. And I think, yes, it does take a lot of work for us to unlearn and relearn the things that we grew up. But I am glad that you're not like many Latino men who are still repeating the cycle. And what would you say
Mm.
to a new dad or to a dad that's kind of grappling with this sort of identity in terms of, oh, I need to be strong and I should not show emotion in front of my kids. I should still discipline the way that I was disciplined, but they're kind of wanting to change that. Like, what would you say to that father?
I don't know what I would say, but I know what I would have liked to have heard when I became a dad. I know that it's important to, I guess, just seek out other people that are like gonna be in the same situation and people who have gone through it. Like for me, what really helped me, shout out to Latino Dad Connection, what really helped me was, speaking to, like like-minded men, people who have gone through the being a first-time dad, people who are, should I say, just open to being different, parenting different, like breaking that, what did you call it? Breaking that,
Generational
you
curses.
just said it. Breaking that, yeah, that breaking that stuff. Because yeah, like how you said, I know for sure that I didn't want to be the same way as my parents were with me. And another thing would be it's okay to be vulnerable. Like because and I still, yeah, I put up a front, right? Because I mean, it is important to show your kids strength. That's one thing for sure. But it's one thing that's way more difficult is finding that balance between strength and being okay with being vulnerable, right? And yeah, I guess just always show up as your authentic self. That's one thing that I always wanted to. I would have liked
Mhm.
to have heard from somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've, I guess, in this case, like we are experienced parents. We've gone through the newborn phase twice. we've learned how to manage that transition from like 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2, and how that impacted
Mm.
our relationship, right? And we had to navigate it as a couple. So, what would you know, tell a dad who is like struggling and trying to find that balance between fatherhood and partnership?
I would certainly say is just don't forget that both of you, that both individuals decided to take on this journey, right? Don't forget that it's not one's sole responsibility to take on all the load, right, of parenting. It's a team. And secondly, I would say always compliment, always make your partner feel good. Even if it's just like, hey, I love your hair, I like the way you look. I think that's important, right? I mean, always just make sure that that intimacy will not go away, because we all know that, especially as new parents, that virtually doesn't
Mhm.
almost exist, right? So it's important to just to let your partner know that you're
Mhm.
that they're still wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important. And I know that I've struggled a lot when we first had Diego. Not that I only wanted him, right? Or I only wanted to mother, but it was very hard to get into the flow of like, you know,
Mhm.
checking in on you, being like intimate with you like that I think many newer parents struggle, but I think to the second time around, I allowed myself to not even worry about like the way that I looked, because a lot of women struggle with like having this new body, right? Having this different identity and how they want to prioritize their kid versus like their partner. And I think that I was in a better mindset the second time around than the first time around. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
But I'm glad that I mean, yeah, you've always been present with me.
I try. I mean, I know that sometimes when we're over here, I seem distant, but
No,
I
you're
try.
never distant.
I try to
You're
be there.
never distant. Yeah. Yeah. And kind of speaking about relationship stuff, I actually got a question from one of my followers. And the question was, how do you work on not projecting internal stress, whether if it's about work or parenting, onto your spouse? So, what would you say to that?
I guess for me, like specifically when just talking about us, I mean, I don't like to see you get hurt, right? And I think more so, and it's probably not the healthiest way, right? But like if I'm feeling like down, stress, or whatever, for whatever reason it may be, I keep it inside, right? Because I think more so about you, like your well being, than I do my own. Like I said, yes, it's probably not the healthiest way, but I prefer to see you happy. I don't want to project my I don't want to project my negativity onto you, because obviously you have a lot on your plate, right? And it's probably not the best advice or like the best saying to give to your audience, right? But just think about the other person, right? Obviously, you love that person. Just remember that hurting somebody's feelings or just bringing them down is it's never good,
Yeah.
right?
But it's interesting because for some reason, though, I know when you are under stress.
Oh, it's because I saw
Yeah. And,
it.
but I mean, you don't show it necessarily, but I know kind of like your breathing patterns. I know when you're
Mm,
breathing really like hard versus like when you're a little calm. And that's a natural body response, right? When you are under stress. And or when you're just like very quiet, although you are quiet, but
no, I'm
but
not.
like when you're very quiet and you're not looking at me in
Mm,
the eye, that's usually when I'm like, something's going on. And for me, like I ask
mm,
questions and I'm like, is everything okay? And I know that I sound like a broken record, but I know that you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart where you're like, oh, I don't want to add this extra layer to her. And I get it. But I think that you are also human, right? You can be hurting. And I think that it's important to talk. But I'm glad that, when I do ask you, hey, is everything okay? You at least tell me. If it's something that's very impacting you, then that's when you open up. And I appreciate you doing that because I might have a lot of stuff under my plate, or there may be a lot of baggage that I'm carrying too. And you know when to like respond, depending on how you're feeling and depending on how I'm feeling. And I think that has been kind of like the power and the beauty of our relationship. For me, kind of going back to that question in terms of how do you work on not projecting internal stress? I mean, it's very hard for me. It's like I definitely show my like I am a very emotional person in terms of just expressing how I feel, and I prefer to let it out.
Mm.
And I feel that sometimes you do feed off of my energy. So I need to be careful on that because I don't want both of us to be angry just because one of us started. And that's something I need to
Mm.
be more aware of. And I think it's the way that I grew up. My family's very outspoken. We
Outspoken.
just express ourselves whenever the fuck we want, like we don't
Mm.
keep a poker face, which is a good thing, but then it's that intent versus impact, right? Like essentially
Mm.
how are my intentions essentially impacting others? And that's, sometimes you do feed off of that, whether if it's like negative energy or just like, whoa, like over the top energy that sometimes I put out. And I think I need to, just learn how to keep my cool in certain times. Yeah, I think we are each other's yin and yang, right? Like at the end of the day, we end up balancing each other out. And I think that has been very helpful, and it has been a positive aspect of our relationship.
Just to be vague, I mean, I just want to be better for you. I just want to be a better support system for you. I want to be
Yeah,
everything for you. So.
likewise. Yeah, well, yeah, thank you again for being here for a second year. I think we're going to keep doing this every year, especially at the end of the season. I think it's really good for listeners to check in on us because again, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been a mom, and I know that there's a lot of single parents too, right? Like that being in a relationship shouldn't be a whole aspect of like
Mm.
parenthood, but
Right.
being that we are in a relationship, I think it's important to have you here, and especially hearing it from the male perspective, specifically the Latino perspective. And so, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.